After spending more than 3 decades on death row, Anthony Todd Boyd was executed by nitrogen hypoxia in the state of Alabama. But the chain of events that led him into that execution chamber began on a suffocating summer afternoon in 1993, when a frantic phone call set off a hunt that would spiral into one of the most horrifying murders Talladega County had ever witnessed. It was a Saturday. The heat pressed down heavy, the kind that made tempers short and decisions reckless. That afternoon, Anthony reached out to a friend, 22-year-old Dwynan Quinty Cox. He claimed he'd been robbed, said he knew exactly who did it, and now he wanted help finding him. When Quinty arrived at the Glen Addy apartments, Anthony was already there, pacing back and forth, visibly agitated. He named the man he believed had stolen from him, Dexter Spinks. According to Anthony, all he needed was a gun and someone willing to ride with him. Quinty left, then came back carrying a Mac-11, a compact rapid-fire weapon built more for intimidation than accuracy. With that, the search began. Robert Shaw Ingram joined them, and the three piled into his car. For more than 30 minutes, they cruised neighborhood streets, circling blocks, scanning corners, hunting for Dexter, but he was nowhere to be found. While driving, they crossed paths with Monique Marcel Ackles, behind the wheel of a blue Chevy Astro van. Marcel joined them, and soon everyone moved into the van. The search continued, but again, Dexter didn't appear. Then as they rolled down 15th Street, something else caught their attention. Near a cluster of trees, in an area locals called Happy Tree, stood Gregory Hughley, known to most as New York. Just days earlier, Gregory had taken drugs from Anthony and never paid for them. He owed him $200. And in that moment, with frustration boiling and the original target still missing, that debt became a death sentence. Without hesitation, Shaw grabbed the gun, jumped out of the van, and confronted Gregory. Gregory froze. He knew why they were there. He raised his hands and begged not to be killed, pleading instead to be beaten. But his words fell on deaf ears. Shaw grabbed Gregory by the shirt, shoved him into the van, and slammed the door. The vehicle sped off, leaving the street behind. Inside the van, Gregory lay on the floor, still begging, promising to get the money. But mercy had already been taken off the table. They made a stop to fill a plastic container with gasoline. Then they drove to Hall Grove Ballpark. When they arrived, Shaw kept the gun trained, while Gregory was dragged from the van and forced onto a wooden bench. Marcel taped Gregory's hands and mouth. Once bound, Gregory was pushed face down onto the bench, helpless. He continued begging for his life. No one responded. Gasoline was poured over his body. A short trail was laid from the bench. Then a match was struck. The fire ignited instantly, racing along the fuel line and engulfing Gregory's clothes. He screamed, twisting against the tape, but no one stepped in. They stood there watching for 10, maybe 15 minutes, until Gregory rolled off the bench and stopped moving. Only then did they leave. As the van headed back toward Anniston, night settling in around them, Anthony broke the silence. He looked out the window and said, they were all in it together now. If one went down, they all would. Around 8 p.m., Quinty dropped Anthony back at the Glen Addy apartments and drove home alone, trying to erase what he'd witnessed. But the image of a man burning alive in a quiet field refused to leave him. The next morning, August 1st, Jesse Smith headed to Hall Grove Ballpark with friends. Before he saw anything, he smelled it. Smoke mixed with something foul, something unmistakably wrong. Near the benches, under the rising sun, lay what remained of a human body, burned, blackened, twisted against the dirt. Jesse ran to the nearest phone and called the Talladega County Sheriff's Office. Deputies arrived quickly, sealing off the area. They photographed the scorched ground, the melted wood, the ash trail that told its own story. but physical evidence was scarce. 2 fingerprints were recovered, both belonging to an investigator who had handled the scene. Still, word spread fast. Whispers turned into tips, and soon names surfaced. Anthony Todd Boyd, Robert Shaw Ingram, Monique Marcel Ackles, Dwinan Quinte Cox. The motive was as simple as it was senseless. The autopsy painted a horrifying picture. Gregory's tongue, throat, and airway were burned and swollen. Soot lined his trachea, confirming he was alive when the fire started. Tape marks remained visible on his arm and across his mouth. The cause of death was thermal burns. Toxicology revealed alcohol, cocaine, and cocaethylene in his system, meaning Gregory had been impaired, likely confused as everything unraveled. In court, the details were impossible to soften. A man kidnapped, bound, silenced, and burned alive in a public park, then abandoned. The trial began in 1995, nearly 2 years after the murder. Prosecutors argued the crime was deliberate, organized, and meant to send a message. Gregory had taken $200 worth of drugs without paying, and for that, they said, he was executed. Anthony was charged with capital murder during a first-degree kidnapping. He claimed he didn't understand the gravity of the charge. But prosecutors said he wasn't a bystander. He helped restrain Gregory. He stayed. He watched. The defense argued youth and a troubled background. They tried to downplay his role, insisting he didn't light the fire. The jury didn't agree. Anthony maintained his innocence through every appeal. He said the system painted a picture it wanted the world to see. But the verdict stood. The jury recommended death. The judge agreed. Originally sentenced to the electric chair, the punishment was later converted to nitrogen hypoxia. Shaw Ingram also received the death penalty, the one prosecutors described as the leader, the man who grabbed Gregory, poured the gasoline, and struck the match. He remains on death row. Marcel avoided execution by taking a plea deal. He received life without parole. Quinte, whose role was considered the least direct, testified for the state. He was sentenced to life with parole and released in 2009. Anthony Todd Boyd was not. After decades of failed appeals, the state set an execution date, October 23, 2025, his daughter's birthday. He asked for a firing squad. The courts denied it. On his final day, Anthony spent time with family and friends. He ate snacks, drank soda and coffee, declined dinner, and made no final meal request. At 5:50 p.m., the curtain opened. He smiled at the witnesses, gave a thumbs up. When asked for final words, he declared his innocence and condemned the justice system. Then, the mask was sealed. At 5:57 p.m., his body reacted. Fists clenched, legs lifted. Breathing became deep and labored, uneven gasps that lasted for more than 15 minutes. At 6:27 p.m., the curtain closed. Anthony Todd Boyd was pronounced dead at 6:33 p.m. He was 56 years old. And the question remains, after all these years, was justice served?